everyone. I'm Deborah Gardner, your host to the now #1 hospitality show, Hospitality Today Live. We are only in our 3rd month on the air. That's 13 episodes. This is number 14, and we are already over 6,000 viewers that watch this show consistently. And that is incredible. So I want to say thank you to all of you that are actually watching and enjoying the real life topics that we bring to you, the amazing guests that work in the industry while they share their perspective, their opinion, their viewpoints, their stories and lessons. And today, well, we continue that promise with a very good friend of mine and neighbor of mine. Well, he does live about 200 miles south of me, but it is CMM David Kliman from the Kliman Group. Today, I will talk with David about his accomplishments within the industry, along with the immediate shock that he experienced when this pandemic hit and what it did to his business at the same time and what he did about it. While we're going to share, he's going to share some tools and so much more. So stay tuned and we will be right back with David Kliman. Today's meeting. And so we want to just say thank you, planspire.com. Now let's welcome to the show my good friend right here in the state of Arizona, David Kliman. How are you doing, David?
And great to be on the show. Nice to see you, Deborah.
I'm glad you're here. How's, by the way, that 10 p.m. pandemic curfew going on in Tucson?
I mean, to be honest, I'm not out too much after 10 o'clock in Tucson.
Anyway.
So I'm not really seeing it, but I'm reading about it. And hopefully the vaccine is not far behind. I read that the first doses are actually in the state of Arizona, are expected in Tucson. So I'm not at the front of the line for the vaccine, but I know we're all looking forward to it.
Yeah, definitely. And we're going to talk so much about that and other things as well. And I wanted to at least open up the chat right now for any comments or questions that our viewers want to ask of you throughout the show. But in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and start by actually saying, that you have had an incredible career. I mean, I just enjoy following you on all your social media links and where your whereabouts are. I mean, first of all, you've worked at the Plaza Hotel in New York. You served as international chair of MPI. You've been on the White House Council of Travel and Tourism, currently serving on MPI Foundation Global Board of Trustees, co-founder for the EIC Apex Business Recovery Task Force. I don't know. I don't even know when you have time to pee, but it doesn't even stop there. I mean, you're the top 25 influencer of the meetings industry by North Star Meetings Group and awarded MPI's International Planner of the Year. And I'm guessing that was Fireman's Fund. I mean, did I cover everything? And if not, what do you talk about yourself in the Kliman Group?
And, along the way, I founded my company about almost 20 years ago and never looked back. So I have been very lucky to have parlayed my expertise and my experience and my connections that I've garnered through starting in the hotel business, becoming a meeting professional, to us being here today. It's all about my network. And I think being reasonably on top of what's going on and hopefully do the right thing. It's all about that.
Well, it's been incredible to watch you grow and continue to grow. And I know, again, we're going to talk more about that, especially during this pandemic time that we're all facing. But why don't we start also with the fact about your backstory of when you first heard or even felt this pandemic hitting you and your business?
Yeah, and there's an Arizona hook to this because we moved to Arizona in July, but we came to Tucson on kind of a relocation site inspection days before the California lockdown. And we flew home on Saturday, I believe it was the 14th of March. And on Tuesday, the 17th of March, California locked down. We were living in Sonoma Valley. And I saw within a matter of 48 hours, my business and professional calendar go from absolutely chock-a-block to being eradicated, eviscerated, and completely empty. So I had a successful consulting practice moderating think tanks for DMOs, hotel companies, speaking, attending meetings, very, very active, as Deborah mentioned. And I saw it evaporate in a matter of 48 hours. And in that time, that shock and awe, I started networking with my ecosystem, with my community in the live events industry. And I have a very good friend at Salesforce, Kristen Horseman, who runs a small little meeting called Dreamforce, 180,000 people in San Francisco every fall. And she produces that meeting. She and I were on the phone commiserating about how our calendars had evaporated and what were we going to do about that. And we identified a kernel of an idea. And that was really the beginning of my transfer from being being a small business owner where business was completely at zero to being fully engaged and being a leader and a thought leader in the events industry, working on solutions to address the crisis. And that to me was a experience which I think has taught me an enormous amount and has brought great resources to the industry through my partnerships.
So this was actually pretty devastating because as your clients, I mean, you've got numerous clients in the destination marketing organizations, the convention centers, hotel companies. I mean, it just went from up here to like zero in a matter of, I mean, it just had to have been so devastating. And so, you know, the leadership position that you hold in our industry, in our profession, is very heartfelt because a lot of the hospitality people that have been going through exactly the same thing. As a matter of fact, according to Event Shift, almost 21% of hospitality people are still out of work. Now, if you think of millions of people who work in the industry, that's thousands of people on scale. And that's a lot. And in addition, there were 52.4% reported some loss of income. And some of that temptation was, you know, because of that, are leaving the industry and because they got to put food on the table, right? Of course. And then business wise, you know, 70.5% have lost their businesses like you, and 7% actually had to close their business. Right. And since we are in one of the largest industries in the world, I think the government's our largest one in the world, it's been really a sad time. And those watching now are really feeling your pain, right, David?
Absolutely. I mean, there are no hyperbole whatsoever. Millions of hospitality industry workers that have either been furloughed or laid off. Their income streams have been completely eviscerated. Many are leaving. I mean, I hear anecdotally, I don't have deep data on this, but many have gone to real estate because the real estate agent trade is a little similar to the hospitality industry, but many are leaving for other fields because it will take a long time for this hospitality industry to come back, even with a vaccine on the very, very near horizon. They started vaccinating in the UK this morning, UK time,
Right.
but it will take time to recover.
Yeah, it will, and I want to talk more about that. But even though you have experienced this firsthand, like the rest of us, I think that the fact here is that you didn't sit on the couch and eat bonbons while watching romantic movies.
Absolutely not.
Or as we do in Arizona, we play golf, or we go, on walking trails, or check out, some coyotes. As a matter of fact, wait a minute, I was following you on
That's my backyard.
Yeah, I think you've been watching some coyotes, and then you've got Molly.
Yep.
You got Molly there. So maybe you have been enjoying a little bit of the Arizona weather.
Yeah. But to your point, I very quickly realized that I had the option of sitting around and catching up on Netflix and getting fat. Maybe not, but anyway, I realized I wasn't going to do that. I was going to get busy. And on day probably 3 of the lockdown and the pandemic, my calendar now empty, I reached back to every one of the clients that I have on retainer. And I said to them, these are destination marketing organizations, hotel companies, tourism organizations. I said, I know your pain. I know your revenue has been cut off like mine, but I want you to know I am here for you. And I did something that I didn't realize was going to be as meaningful as it turned out to be, but I offered my services on a pro bono basis to every one of my clients for the duration of the pandemic. So I said to Hyatt and San Francisco Travel and all my clients, I am here for you. Let's convene meetings with clients virtually. I will moderate them for you. I will do research for you, all pro bono, because I realized I didn't want to slip away. I wanted to remain relevant and front and center. And by doing pro bono work with them, to this day, this morning, I had a think tank for the United Nations that I was doing on the live event industry. Wow. And I've stayed front and center. And then the EIC, the Events Industry Council Task Force, was another kernel that came out of this.
Well, and I think that is brilliant of what you just shared, because again, a lot of people don't know what to do. And so what you're saying and sharing with us is that you actually reached out to your customers to let them know you are there for them through thick and thin.
Absolutely.
And that's admirable. So was there any payoff so far to this? Have you been able to
interesting.
A contract or two?
I actually have my first signed full freight contract for October 2021 from one of those clients.
Great.
They've said, we anticipate we'll be meeting a year from now, signed contract. So that's green shoots of recovery.
That's great. That's great to hear. And then, of course, that's where EIC was born as co-founder. Tell us about that.
So Kristen Horstman from Salesforce and I were chatting about there's no handbook for this pandemic. There's no rule book. Nobody knew what to do, where to get information. There were a million different websites, and we said, we need to aggregate, consolidate, and communicate the best practices and the accepted practices of how to deal with the pandemic from the events industry point of view. And I took that idea to Amy Calvert, the CEO of the Events Industry Council, introduced her to Kristen, and that idea flew. She quickly took it to her board of directors. They adopted it, and we created, and I'm proud to be a co-founder along with Kristen, the Events Industry Council COVID Business Recovery Task Force, which has delivered to date an incredible amount of open source, free of charge, global resources that are designed for planners and suppliers. And here you see it, accepted practices guide for the events industry. I am hugely proud of this enormous teamwork that now we have more than 40 people on the task force, a cross-pollination of the industry. I have never seen competitors come together and cooperate for the greater good like they have through this task force. Very proud moment.
Well, and it's very impressive too, because the committee there's some heavy hitters in the industry, friends of yours and friends of mine that are on this committee, because even though a lot of people, know of AIC, knowing what they do, but yet as far as, research recognition, keeping the best practices in place. But with this task force, it's all about planning, preparing, and participating in the recovery. Can you tell us where you are and how that is helping the industry to date?
Well, we've done a bunch of things, including creating an event design guide, which event professionals and suppliers can do right now, real time, for those meetings that are taking place during COVID and those taking place near term as the recovery begins. So an event design guide, how to properly set up a trade show, a meeting room, an incentive event, a corporate meeting, a public meeting with safety guidelines based on COVID. So, you hear 1.5 meters, 6 foot separation, all of that taken through and threaded into the live events industry. We have a wellness guide. Don't underestimate the psychological impact that this crisis has had on all of us in the event industry, where our industry has been turned upside down and put into the great pause. We have a wellness guide that deals with that. I chaired the destination guide, which deals with how destination marketing organizations, basically cities, can communicate effectively the current realities to event professionals of what's going on in their cities. And that's a global guide. We have a hotel guide that Mike Dominguez was chair of that talks about hotel protocols. And it's important to understand, we didn't write these guides. We curated and aggregated and consolidated them. We wanted to go to subject matter experts in the field around the world, not just the United States, but around the world, and gather a definitive accepted practices guide. And that's what we've done. It's all open source, free of charge, available online.
Wow, that's amazing on all fronts, because it's a much needed task force for what we're going through right now. And I just know there's going to be a lot more to come pertaining to that, especially with the platforms that you all are tackling to help our industry get back to where it needs to be. Right now, I wanted to bring on some fans of yours that are watching right now. As a matter of fact, some people are doing some great commenting going on here. Let's see, we've got Elizabeth, I believe, or actually we got Lisa, or yeah, Elizabeth here, that is saying, okay, great to see you both here on the broadcast today, which I'm glad you're here as well, Elizabeth. We've got David.
David Perry.
David Perry wants to say hello. And of course, he must be a big fan of yours. He's saying, you rock. And then we've got Lisa here that's just wanting to say congratulations, especially with the EIC. That is really, really important. But I wanted to swing back over to David again, because he does have a question for you that we're going to talk about next. So I thought I might as well give him heads up on it.
Yeah.
And it has to do with face-to-face meetings and your perspective there.
Well, I tell you, they're happening already, but they're happening in moderation. They're happening safely. there is no on-off switch that anyone has where it's just going to instantly go back to what's what. But there are real examples. I actually attended my first face-to-face meeting about 2 weeks ago in Phoenix at the Wigwam, where I spoke at a meeting. There were 52 people in a ballroom that normally would have sat 400 or 500. Everyone was socially distanced. There were temperature checks before you got in the room. All the meals were done outside. So meetings are happening, and there are examples. And regionally in North America, there are great differences. You know, we know California is locked down. Florida is not, Texas is not. So there are some meetings taking place, and there's certain cities that have had good traction with drive market. People are generally reluctant to fly from A to B. There's exceptions to that, but I'm talking about in the live event space. But people, there's much more sentiment about jumping in a car and driving somewhere, as I did to go to Phoenix. And there are some cities that have some traction on that. I will caution that it's different everywhere. Asia, there is a return already. Singapore is hosting meetings. China is hosting meetings. But for the United States, I think the big trigger will be, and also globally, the widespread adoption of a vaccine, which once we get to herd immunity, we have 60, 70% of the population with a vaccine. I think you're going to see a slow return. I don't think it's going to be rapid. I truly believe it will be years before Deborah and I see our businesses return to what was in 2019. That will take time. Yeah. And there will always be a hybrid component.
Yeah, definitely. Now, on the other side of the spectrum here, we see from recent COVID-19 reports that the numbers are increasing. They're getting higher and higher, like you said, in particular cities. And although we want to push meetings and events into the forefront and get back, to the face-to-face status, what about the fact that maybe meetings and events are actually contributing to those numbers increasing by those numbers repeating, going back to doing some, even though they're small gatherings, are we contributing to this? And
I think there's only
2021.
Yeah, I only have a little bit of verifiable data that talks about people contracting COVID at a meeting, and the numbers are in the single digits that I am aware of. But I will say this: anybody who is hosting a meeting, planning a meeting, or attending a meeting has a responsibility to adhere to a code of conduct. And that means wearing a mask, doing the right thing, believing in the science, taking this seriously, because this is a deadly disease.
Right.
And if you're going to meet safely, then take it seriously and believe in the science.
So is it too early for meeting professionals, event professionals to start planning for 2021?
No, and they are already. And if you talk to suppliers, there's significant compression in the latter half of 2021, where planners have postponed meetings from 2020 or even the beginning of 2021 and pushed them to second, third, fourth quarter 2021. So with the caveat that the vaccine is real, which I believe it is, and there is widespread adoption, you're going to see a return to meetings in the latter part of 2021. And if you talk to suppliers, there's tons of business on the books.
Great. That's good to hear. That's really good to hear. So I want to make sure that the Q3, Q4 are going to be stronger. It's going to take some rev up time from the beginning of the year, but I'm glad to hear your expertise on that. We do have another question from David, as a matter of fact, pertaining to what you were saying about cities.
Yeah, open air.
Yeah, what about open air and open space? You know, a lot of times, especially hotels, they won't want to promote outdoor space to a lot of groups. But don't you think their mindset is flipped on that by now?
100%. So, you know, cities that have the ability to host a live event outdoors, I believe, are going to be very attractive. And even cities like San Francisco or New York or DC in the right season can accommodate those. And, you know, if you look at all the transformation of restaurants moving to sidewalk space and event space that is available outdoors, absolutely. But to David Perry's point, cities, the Arizona cities, Palm Springs, San Diego, Miami, Key West, the very, very fair weather cities that can accommodate large groups, I think are going to be very attractive to event professionals for that very reason.
That's probably where the site selections will start increasing in those areas because of that, that strong option at this point, depending on which state we're talking about, for sure. And that's what's so hard to dictate for the future, what that's going to look like to them. But yeah, I think you're right about that as well. Well, for those of you that might be just joining us, we are here with David Kliman with the Kliman Group, and we're here and open for comments and additional questions for you. And we're just so excited to even know more about what he has to say at this point. I do know that we do have another question, and this one actually comes from Lynn Wellish. And Lynn is a consistent viewer of our show, and she actually wants to know, you know, will you share some of those ideas, especially from the DMOs, and how to attract business?
Yeah, unique incentive ideas. That's an interesting comment. So first of all, I'll say I believe one of the outcomes of the pandemic is that the traditional rankings of cities that all of us in the field are familiar with, first tier, Vegas, San Francisco, Orlando, etc., second tier, third tier, I think the tiers are going to blend. And I think there's going to be a mind shift of what is magnetically attractive. You know, we all know San Francisco has an allure, Vegas, Orlando, Tahiti, you know, places like that are just aspirational or just instantly magnetic. But I think places that have traditionally been in second, third, or even beyond tier may become more magnetically attractive because they might be smaller, they might offer the ability to own a destination. And Lynn, I'm afraid I don't have any definitive details on unique incentive ideas that, let's say, a second or third traditional tier city has. I'm going to look into that and see what I can find out.
Yeah, and you guys can stay connected because we're going to give Lynn and everyone else your contact information at the end. And if anybody else has additional comments or questions, definitely join in the chat because we're going to
say one thing though, that there is a newfound flexibility that cities, suppliers have within reason. And so while it might not be specific to unique incentive ideas, that smart destinations and suppliers have embraced a sense of flexibility due to the crisis because they know that there's no handbook for this. And they know that so much is out of everyone's control.
Right.
So by being flexible and listening to the clients, they've gotten traction that way.
Right. And that's a key word because we've had to learn flexibility even on our virtual world.
Boy.
No doubt. Well, I have something to bring to your attention, and I know you can help our viewers with this because there's been, you know, one of the biggest fears out there for leaders in your space, especially the C-suite executives, feel that they will probably lose confidence in the value of face-to-face as they gradually learn to live without him. And we're talking about virtual hybrid. Some event planners may have not actually collected enough data to prove that ROI for face-to-face, to help the leaders be more comfortable with that. So you hang out, you talk with all these leaders. Do you think that's really a true fact or consensus?
I don't think it's consensus. I think it exists, but I'll flip it and I'll say that one of the outcomes of the crisis of the pandemic is there is a pent-up demand to meet. And chief executive officers are realizing that this works, and the virtual component, omni-channel component, is a great solution, but it only augments face-to-face. And there is a lacking of that ability to have non-scheduled, I mean, we're in a scheduled environment here, non-scheduled conversations, casual conversations, walking for a cup of coffee or going outside for a bit of sunshine. And smart executives realize that running organizations, that meetings truly are face-to-face meetings, are part of their overall success criteria and quotient, and they're missing it. Now, it's not to say there are certainly organizations that will wholeheartedly post-crisis embrace the digital world and say, we're just going to save a boatload of money and we're just going to do away with it and just have the most essential face-to-face. But I believe that that will be an anomaly, and that you will see a return over time. I'm talking years. I think really 2024 is what I'm forecasting, is when you'll see a full return to the hotel occupancy, the airline occupancy, cruise line, all of that, and the live event space.
If not even better than the 2019 numbers, hopefully.
Yeah.
Just exploding. Now, when you brought up virtual, I'm a big fan of event stats. They asked a lot of the meeting planners and event planners out there, once you go back, what does that look like? And they said about 65% of them said hybrid, 39% said small groups. So is this what you see too, above and beyond just what you mentioned? Because you mentioned the benefits of sunshine and networking. Are there any other benefits that really help with the hybrid and the small groups? Because again, we want face-to-face, we want large groups. So it seems like we're going.
Yeah, I mean, certainly hybrid offers the ability within reason to engage people that might not ordinarily be able to attend face-to-face. Now, we do have equity issues around bandwidth inclusion. I acknowledge that not everybody has high-speed internet, but even so, virtual offers the ability to include people that could not normally travel to X live event meeting. And that will remain, and it will create new audiences. And to that end, it augments in a very positive way the live event experience. You can have far more people attending a meeting. I was on a meeting, I was on a technology meeting with 39,000 people. Wow. Now, I was a very passive observer. You couldn't, the chat was going so fast that they had to shut it down.
Oh my gosh.
Read the chat. But you know, that was an interesting experience. Very passive, but interesting. To get almost 40,000 people engaged like that for an hour and a half, remarkable.
Wow. Wow. And talking about a different way of having revenue streams of income for companies and organizations when they can have it that large, and just the the global aspect of it all, and plus lower overhead for companies and organizations because of being hybrid as well.
Yeah, but keep in mind, there is a cost to hybrid. And that, I think at the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of people said, well, Zoom or whatever you're using, it's either free or it's so inexpensive that it's going to do away with face-to-face meetings, which have a cost to them. Well, to do a hybrid meeting correctly, there is a real cost. And if you're having a concurrent face-to-face meeting, you might even have an added cost of producing your face-to-face and the cost of producing your hybrid high-quality meeting. So I caution that this kind of anecdotal, well, we'll go virtual and it's going to be very low cost. I caution that theory, because to do it right, there is a real cost of money and resources.
It's almost like you get what you pay for sometimes.
Yeah.
That's a good point, because a lot of people think it's not going to be, but I guess with technology, even though the competition of technology is really forcing themselves into the meeting space, that competition actually is a good thing, but it's still going to cost. Good point.
I mean, even look how you produce this meeting. You do this at a very high level. This doesn't come free. You've invested in this. And, imagine if you're the ABC Association or XYZ Corporation and you have tens of thousands or hundreds of people and it's interactive and there's breakout rooms and lots of different speakers virtually. That's a very complicated thing to do from a technology point of view, and it's not free.
Very true. Very true. Especially when you want to continue to up your game, just like face-to-face meetings. Up in your game, what is it going to look like the next, event? Whew, wow, that's a lot of work. Well, I tell you what, the last show that we had our buddy, the COO of PCMA, Bruce McMillan, and last week he shared with us what he had learned in the last few weeks. And he said, which he admitted to stealing the quote from the superhero Marvel, he said, with great power comes great responsibility. We can do a better job of giving back, and we were late to the party, he said. We need to understand the purpose of events and have the courage to act upon it, serve our communities that serve us. Now, after sharing your backstory earlier in the hour with us, and fast forwarding today, what are some of the things that you've learned looking back like that?
Yeah, and I listened to Bruce last week, and that was a wonderful statement. Empathy, certainly, to have that real sense of understanding the depth of the impact of what's going on. Key learning. I think also for me, at this point in my career, I have embraced in a new way and ratcheted up my mantra of continuous learning. I refuse to give up. So I am reading far more than ever before. And I'm reading all different things, from historical novels to newspapers from not just one country. So I think empathy, adaptability, and the mantra of continuously learning. And through that learning, having a greater understanding of points of view, of statistics, of reality. That has been a lesson of the crisis for me.
Wow, that is really, really good information. And I think everybody's kind of in that same situation, need to ask that question, what have you learned from the last couple, months? And I can't believe it's going on a year that we've been in this. Where did that year go? But I think if everybody would reflect and learn from it, and see where you need to go from there will be one of the first things to help anybody get out of a post COVID-19 situation.
And
So,
not to wallow in it, not to,
right.
it's tempting that woe is me and, I'm out of a job, and I empathize with that completely. But understand that within reason, there is some control that we as individuals can take. And I don't want to discount this economic severity. I understand that. But within reason, taking positive action can be meaningful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we need to wake up every day counting our blessings at the same time, because the beauty is the industry might feel like it's dead. It's not. We've been through this before. We've handled this before, and we definitely know that we're going to recover. And thank God you're on the EIC committee, the co-founder of it, to help make that happen. I know that's a big responsibility, but at the same time, it's a much needed situation to help this industry turn around. So we're coming to a close. If there's any other comments or questions, please bring it on. We'll be happy to have David answer those questions for you, for sure. But I do know I have at least one more question,
Please.
and that is what's the one piece of advice that really sticks in your mind that you want to share with all our viewers around the world right now to emerge from a pandemic that shut down our industry and to thrive in post-COVID-19 world? What's that one piece of advice that you'd like to share?
I can put it in one sentence, and it's this: think of the possibilities. Don't get stuck in one thing. Think of the possibilities of what can be, and then run with it. And I do that every day. And when I think of the possibilities of what could be in our industry, I think of reinvention. I think of redesigning, of what I do professionally, of the way I can deliver services. And by thinking of the possibilities, I keep my head and my mind wide open and allow myself to dream and then act.
Yeah, that is very, very good advice. And I'm hoping everyone, whatever segment of the hospitality industry is watching, will grab that information, because that helps. That really does help. Now, if anybody wants to get in touch with you to
Please.
expand on this conversation today, I certainly know that contacting you will be very, very easy.
There you go. Just reach out. I come right up on LinkedIn as well. You can get me there, or via email, or on my website. I welcome contact. I will tell you that I am successful today because of the contacts and relationships that I have made since the day I walked into the Plaza Hotel, first job out of college. It's about relationships, and they are more important today during COVID and post-pandemic than ever.
I totally agree with you. And those that want to get in touch and learn more about the task force, how I believe you put some information in the chat.
Yeah, I see it in the private chat, but if you simply Google events, plural, Events Industry Council COVID, it comes right up. Oh, and it's right there as well. And everything is open source. All the resources are there. There's a risk assessment guide, the event design. It's all there. You can download full flip books. You can download a single page, and we welcome you to do that.
Oh, that's wonderful to hear. That I'm sure even people are still coming through with some more questions for the chat, and we're actually running out of time. But I certainly want to at least let them know that they can still contact you and learn more about the task force, and even bring their ideas by contacting you as well. Because more, everybody's have a brilliant mind in this industry, and we want to keep everybody involved as much as possible. And I know you're going to be back to share some of that with us in GMID Day.
And just really quickly, the task force's work is a living document. They're online. They will be updated, not continually, but on a regular basis.
Oh, excellent, excellent. Well, this was such a pleasure. I do have one more promise that we have to do with each other, and that is to have some margaritas sometime.
Absolutely, we must.
Now that we're neighbors,
Anytime.
That'll be great. That'll be great. Well, thank you. This has been a wealth of information. Everyone I know is going to enjoy not only the continuance of this live, but the replays as well. And I'll let them know more about that. So thank you, David. David Kliman with the Kliman Group, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. This was an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Deborah. A real pleasure. All the best. Stay safe, everyone.
Well, thank you so much for joining on this show's episode with David Kliman with the Kliman Group. I'm hoping that you really enjoyed it as much as I did. And stay tuned for more of David's brilliancy, because like I just mentioned, he will be back in April 2021 when we have a special edition right here on HTL for the GMID Day. It's going to be incredible, celebrating the meetings and events industry, and we hope that you'll be joining us then. More information coming up with that. In the meantime, if you'd like to actually see this conversation again with David, or to share the episode with others, by all means, just visit us right here on Hospitality Today Live Facebook page, YouTube, and now we've joined LinkedIn. And if you have any questions, please contact us at hello@hospitalitytodaylive.com. And if anything, join our conversations, our community here for any more upcoming shows and resources. We want to thank Planspire for sponsoring this week's show. Just go to planspire.com. Now, next week, we have another great guest, the Executive Director of Meetings for the National Cattlemen's Beef Association, Kristen Torres. Kristen will talk about how she kept her largest in-person event back in July, how she kept it very safe, and what surprised her the most about the event, and what her future meetings look like for 2021. So don't miss next Tuesday's conversation right here on HTL. I'm Deborah Gardner. Thank you so much for joining us. Have a very productively busy day, everybody.